Well, hello everybody. I hope you're able to get outside and enjoy this beautiful day. I couldn't believe it. Went outside, the sun is shining, and you know what? I think I'm going to finally wear some shorts outside. So, I'm excited to get outside, and hope you are too. Well, this week we are going to be in Exodus chapter 8, verses 1 through 15. And before we get there, I want to give you all a quick recap of what we talked about last week. So last week was the start of the plagues of Egypt. God turned the Nile into blood and proved that he is bigger than the Egyptian God of the Nile. Now, Pharaoh was not convinced by this plague, so things will get worse. There had to be another plague come. God had to prove his point again to Pharaoh and to the Egyptian people and to all the world. So, have you ever heard somebody say this? Things could not get any worse. Well, these next few chapters are going to make that very statement seem really false. Why? Because things are going to get a lot worse for Egypt and Pharaoh, and everyone's going to see it. They're going to think, wow, things can't get any worse than this. And then Pharaoh hardens his heart, and things get a lot worse. But I just want to start the lesson by giving you all some advice. Worse is a deep hole that can always get deeper. So don't ever think that things could never get any worse. So let's start our lesson and start reading Exodus chapter 8, verses 1 through 7. Now I have my NASB Bible and ASB Bible back, so maybe we'll be able to follow along a little bit better. So chapter 8, verse 1 says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite your whole territory with frogs. The Nile will swarm with frogs, which will come up and go to your house, and into your bedroom, and on your bed, and into the houses of your servants, and on your people, and into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. So the frogs will come out up on you, and your people, and all your servants. Then the Lord said to Moses, Say to Aaron, Stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the streams, and over the pools, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. The magicians did the same with their secret arts, making frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So you might be thinking, frogs aren't too bad. Bring on the frogs. You might be saying, bring them on. I like to eat frog legs. Well, see, the problem with frogs is that they're going to be everywhere. They're going to be in your food. They're going to be in your water, the water that you drink with, the water that you bathe with, the water that you clean your dishes with and brush your teeth. They're going to be in your bed. And if you have kids at that time, they're probably going to be in your infant's mouth, because infants can catch frogs. And what do they do with things that they grab? They put it in their mouth. Now, do we want frogs in babies' mouths? No, we do not want that. But have you ever heard frogs croaking at night? See, I was blessed to grow up in the country, and we had some ponds. You could sit out on the porch and listen at night, and you can just hear the frogs just start croaking. And they just do it nonstop, and it's real loud, and you think, wow, there must be 1 million frogs down there croaking. But in reality, it might just be like 5 or 6. I don't know, I never counted them. It's dark. But they're really loud. And can you imagine trying to go to sleep with a frog croaking on your nightstand? Or maybe under your pillow, or in the covers with you? Or throughout your whole house, they just start croaking all together? Or imagine trying to put your kids to sleep. You know, we all have our bedtime routine, or at least I did when I was a kid. I'd read the Bible with my dad, would do some wrestling, and then would go to bed. Some people like to read their kid bedtime stories, and it's like a nice calming time. Brush your teeth, get your pajamas on after a shower, and then go to bed, read a story, go to sleep. It's a peaceful time. Now, you can't really do that routine of peace with frogs everywhere jumping around on your kid's bed and croaking, and it would just be a nightmare trying to get a kid go to sleep at this time. So this plague here of the frogs coming and going everywhere, it disrupts everybody's lives. pharaohs, the Hebrews, the Egyptians. It would not be a peaceful time. But this plague is also proving that God is bigger than an Egyptian goddess. And that goddess's name is Heqet, Heqet. See, this is the Egyptian god of fertility. And if you haven't guessed by now, she's represented as a frog. Or in some cases, she is a woman with the head of a frog. So that's what the Egyptians believed, and that was their goddess. But further reading into this Egyptian god or goddesses, the god of the Nile and the frog goddess are very closely related. See, last week we talked about the Nile god. When the Nile floods, frogs go everywhere because there's water everywhere, so frogs go everywhere. So the Egyptians correlated the flooding of the Nile, bringing frogs, means it's a time for new life. That might be childbirth, might be crops, it might be corn, wheat, whatever they grew. That's what they correlated, which it's a good observation. When the floods come and frogs come out and start croaking, well, shortly afterwards, there's a new life. But an interesting fact that I found is during childbirth, the Egyptian women would actually wear these amulets with frogs on them. And what they believe that these amulets would do is they believe that it would protect them during their childbirth from evil being around them during childbirth or affecting their child. Because what happens when, like, a terrible thing happens back then, they would correlate it with something evil happened. An evil spirit might have come and had them have a stillbirth or killed their baby, or the baby had complications. So for a woman during childbirth, this was a really important goddess, a really important amulet to have, that this goddess would protect them and their little baby, innocent child, during childbirth. So let's think about how the Egyptians are feeling for a minute here. The god of the Hebrews is able to control, one, the powerful Nile River that brings life to them, and also the frogs, the frog goddess. In other words, the god of the Hebrews is more powerful than the Egyptian goddess of fertility, the goddess who brings them babies and makes them safe or brings them new crops. He's stronger than both of them. So I hope you can see now, as we're reading this and learning about the terrible things that happened to Egypt, that this isn't just God causing disruption to the Egyptian lives. He's not punishing Egypt solely. He's not punishing Pharaoh solely. But rather, he's proving that he's bigger than their gods. Now, Egypt was the superpower at the time, all right? Everyone went to Egypt, and everyone knew of Egypt as being powerful and flourishing. They're rich. So, God is going to be proving that they're not as big and powerful as they thought, that he's bigger and more powerful than them. So let's continue reading in chapter 8, and we're going to be reading verses 8 through 15. So verse 8 says, Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, Entreat the Lord that he may remove the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may sacrifice to the Lord. Moses said to Aaron, The honor is yours to tell me, when shall I entreat for you and your servants and your people, that the frogs may be destroyed from you and your houses, that they may be left only in the Nile? Then he said, Tomorrow. So he said, May it be according to your word, that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will depart from you and your houses and your servants and your people. They will be left only in the Nile. Then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried to the Lord concerning the frogs which he had inflicted upon Pharaoh. The Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, the courts, and the fields. So they piled them in heaps, and the land became foul. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart, and did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. If you heard growling in the background, my dog brought me a toy and wants to play. So I'm going to have to play with him after this lesson. So, do you remember early on in the lesson how I said worse is a deep hole? Well, things can only get worse when you don't follow God. See, Pharaoh finally budges a little bit. The frogs must have got to him. It must have been hard to get his kids going to bed, and he got tired of it. So he he comes to the bargaining table with Moses and Aaron. He's like, all right, if you get rid of these frogs, I'll let your people go. Now, let your people go worship 3 days in the wilderness. That's all they asked for. They didn't ask to be gone and make their own nation. God didn't ask for that yet. So they're just asking for 3 days off. All right? So that's not too much to ask for. So Moses and Aaron go to God, and Moses pleads to God. And God says, yep, I'll do it according to your word. Now I'll let the frogs only be in the Nile. So the frogs retreated back to the Nile. They weren't in the houses. They weren't in the beds. They weren't on the nightstands. They weren't croaking at night. And Pharaoh started feeling a little bit better. And he was able to get some sleep. He was able to put his kids to sleep. And he decides, you know what? I'm not going to uphold my part. Things are nice now. Now, before we start bashing Pharaoh too bad and saying, oh, Pharaoh's a terrible person, he disobeyed God, how many times in our life have we called out to God to help us in a time of need? And then when things get better, we just go about our daily lives. We forget God. And sometimes we don't even say thank you to God. See, I know that I've done this too many times to count. And usually in my life, when things are good, I tend to be more distant to God. I don't pray as much. I don't read my Bible as much. I don't thank him as much. And only when things are bad or really bad is when I really draw near to God. I start praying to him, start reading his word, I start focusing, start changing my life to look more like Christ, more like a biblical example. And it seems God will always send me something bad, so I'll get closer to him. And I think I'm being a little bit smart here, all right? And what I'm going to say here is I think I'm smart by being close to him during the good times, so he doesn't send me anything bad, anything extra to like remind me like, hey, I'm still here. And I'm hoping that's the case anyway. I think it's beneficial to stay closer to God, not just so bad things don't happen, but so that you can be more like Christ, be a better Christian, help others and everything. Now, just to be clear, just because you're close to God, that does not mean that bad things will never come, okay? All I'm saying here in my smart thinking, where I start thinking, all I'm saying is maybe God won't send you anything extra bad, so you remember to draw closer to him. Bad things will still come. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that your life will always be butterflies and rainbows. Bad things come. We're in a fallen world, and that's the truth. But I don't know about you. I don't need any extra bad things in my life. So I'm just going to follow God, stay good with him. That's my goal. That's my plan. And I hope that you guys can take advantage of that too, because I hope extra bad things don't come to you. Now, that's all of the lesson for this week. And if you look about next week, verse 16, we look into the plague of flies. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't like flies. When there's a fly in the house, I'm finding that fly swatter, and I am going on the hunt till I kill that thing. Because flies get on my counter, and I just think flies are disgusting. They carry nasty stuff, and they spit everywhere, and I really don't like flies. And me personally, I think flies are worse than frogs. So we see here that Pharaoh doesn't give in for frogs, so God's going to send in flies, which are worse. So I just want to say thank you again for tuning in this week for the Youth Livestream, and I look forward to seeing you all Sunday morning for worship. And we are still doing our social distance stuff, so if you get there before 10:15, you get there early, that's perfectly fine. We can get you seated and continue with the routine until we're told differently. So hope you all have a great rest of the week, and see you all later.